Hello, everybody, and welcome to Beyond Sunday. I'm Brandon Walters. This is Reverend James King. And, well, James, we actually got us a question.
Oh, great.
One of the viewers sent in a question. So I thought that's what we talk about today. Is that good with you?
Sounds good to me.
All right, because it's a good one.
Oh, good.
And I think it's got a lot of discussion behind it.
Good. Well, what you got?
Well, Jill writes in and wants to know where the spirit goes when we die.
Where the spirit goes when we die.
And that should open a nice big old can of
so.
hello.
Yes. Well, you know, there's a lot of different ideas about that. But I think the best way to approach it would be if I would just maybe share some of my experiences.
All right.
Okay? And there was one particular experience that kind of put me on to what happens, you know, in the afterlife. And that was when Lee and I were first married. We were pretty young, 21, 22 years old. And we were asleep one night in our first apartment. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, 4 or 5 o'clock, it was early morning, I heard my name called. And so it was really loud, you know, and it was like, I was totally asleep, fully asleep. And so I sat up, you know, in the bed, just bolted right up. And in that moment, I saw something just kind of go by, you know, in front of my eyes. And I thought of my uncle. And so a couple minutes later, you know, early in the morning, which, you know, don't usually get calls that early, my mother called. And she said that my Uncle Charlie had just passed of a heart attack. And so I feel like it was him letting me know that he had passed, and he was just trying to talk to me. We had been close. And so he was just kind of letting me know that he had passed. And so that was the first one. It wasn't the first experience I had, but it was the one that kind of led me to understand a little bit more about the afterlife and what happens to the soul or the spirit when we die. And then another instance, a few years later, I was the pastor of a church, and my grandmother had passed away, just maybe a couple weeks before. And so I had closed my eyes and said the prayer, and then when I opened my eyes, I looked and looked in the back row, and my grandmother was sitting there, okay? And then as I continued to look, it's like she was gone. And so for a period of time, for about a month, maybe 6 weeks, out of the corner of my eye, I would see her like she was sitting in the service every Sunday. And she had never come, you know, to the church before when she was alive. But she started coming after she had passed. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And so that was my experience. I'd close my eyes to pray at times, and then whenever I opened my eyes, I would see her in the back row, or out of the periphery of my eye sometimes. And so I thought that was interesting, and I kept putting all this together. And then there would be times...
Let's see, let me ask you something,
Sure.
because I know you used to be a fundamentalist
Yes,
minister.
right.
Where did that fit into the fundamentalist belief? I mean, if that's happening when you're a fundamentalist preacher, and then, you know,
Yeah.
how do you kind of
I really,
catalog
at the
that?
time, didn't know where to put it exactly.
Yeah, okay.
It was actually years later that I finally put it together and really understood what was going on. At the time, I didn't know what to do with it, you know. But I knew that even as a child, you know, I'd had some of these kinds of experiences. But I knew that something, you know, was going on, you know. I just didn't have the whole picture.
Yeah.
So
you had another story, I'm sorry.
yeah, that's all right. A few years later, you know, I would, you know, from time to time, I'd do a memorial service or a funeral service. Mm-hmm. And I remember a few times, one of the times that I was doing this service, they was at the mortuary, and they would have me in another room. And, you know, where you could sit, collect your thoughts, and pray, meditate, you know, whatever, and before you would come out and do the eulogy in the service. And so as I was sitting there, I had my eyes closed. In my mind's eye, I saw the casket open, And the gentleman and I'd never met this family before, okay? I was just asked to do the service for them. And this gentleman sat up and looked at me and said, "Tell my wife," and I don't remember exactly the words, but it's something about, "Tell my wife I love her." And it was a specific way that he had told me to say it. Then he said, "Then tell my mother-in-law, I can't remember which one it was, tell her that it's in my favorite drawer." Okay?
Okay.
And so here I was, young in my early 20s, you know, young minister. I didn't know these people from anybody. And so I thought, how in the world am I going to do this? And so after the service, I'm shaking hands with the family, and they seemed to be in, you know, pretty good spirits. You know, he had been a fun guy, and he wanted a really lively, you know, wake, you know. Okay. Anyhow, so I was shaking hands with the wife, and we were talking. I said, "Well, you know, if he was here, I'm sure he would probably say how much he loves you," and then I said it in the way that I heard it. And she looked at me, she said, "You know," she said, "that's absolutely the way he would have said it." She said, "I'm so glad you said that." She said, "That really helps me feel good." You know, I said, "Well, good." And then the mother-in-law, whoever it was, steps up. And she introduces herself, and I shake hands with her. And she said, "Yeah, we just can't find those papers, you know." And I said, "Well, you never know." I said, "It could be in his favorite drawer of his desk or something." And she said, "Oh, that's a great idea." They were looking for insurance papers. And so she said, "I'm going to check that out," you know. So I thought that was really, really interesting, you know, this experience. And there were other times I had similar experiences, you know, of people who had passed. And it was never really heavy, or it was never really, you know how the movies, they played the afterlife like it's really a dark and, you know, and all this blood and gut and gore kind of a stuff. You know, it wasn't anything like that. It's just these spirits that have gone on, and sometimes if there's unfinished business, they don't proceed on fully into where, you know, the next step or next stage of their evolution, spiritual evolution. And sometimes they'll hang around for a while just to make sure that things get settled, you know. Mm-hmm. It's like I had a family one time that told me that the father had passed in the family, and he was going to be buried in another state. So they all loaded up and went to that state, and they were staying in a particular hotel. Now this father was he had a young daughter, and he was very particular about how she took care of her car. So he was always after her to make sure that she took care of the maintenance. Well, they walked into the hotel room, and the digital clock was turned upside down, okay? And it was 7:10, but it was upside down, and it said oil.
Oh.
Okay? And she looked at that, and she started to cry, and the whole family started to cry, because they knew that was the father saying, because her oil needed to be changed, wow. that was his way of connecting.
Yeah.
Isn't that neat?
That's very cool.
Yeah. And so, you know, a lot of times when people pass, you know, they want to let us know that they're okay, you know, because the spirit world is not a bad place. It's not a scary place. It is a multi-dimensional, you know, Jesus said, "In the Father's house are many mansions." That's what the King James says. Well, if you look at it in the Greek, it says many rooms, or many places of abode.
Dimensions.
Many dimensions.
Yeah.
So there are many different dimensions that are out there, and there are beings that are having experiences on all different kinds of worlds and realms and places. You know, probably anything that you could imagine in your mind, there probably is a world or realm that is like that.
Well, I guess that brings up an interesting point, because you're talking about beings or spirits that
yes.
are trying to communicate
okay.
in certain times, and they want to get a point across. But
right.
you know, there's certain people who seem to be more open to that,
right.
whether they get it directly, or John Edwards comes to mind as a
Yes,
guy who tends to get
Sure.
messages and pass them on.
Yeah.
What is that about? I mean, how do you open yourselves up? Obviously, you're pretty open to it. It's happened to you quite a few times. I haven't had that happen. I had another friend of mine that used to be able to take pictures. She saw spirits and would take pictures. Had incredible. This is back before Photoshop and all that stuff.
Right.
She had an incredible collection of these amazing pictures you couldn't figure out. I was like, no. She goes, no, I see them. I just snap.
Yeah.
And so, how does that work? How do you open up to that? How do you become more
Well,
available?
for me, it wasn't anything that I intentionally
Right.
started out to, it was just happening. And I think what it is with some people, all of us have gifts. All of us have ways of expression, and sensitivities to certain things. And I guess it was just part of my makeup, And I think that's where people like John Edwards and James Van Praagh and people like that who communicate with the spirit, because I don't do it on a regular basis, that kind of thing, but it happens to me. It comes to me from time to time, usually for a specific reason or something's going on. And a lot of times in a memorial service, I'll sense the energy of the person. And a lot of people will sense it too. They say, well, I feel like that he's here.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people do come back to the memorial service and just to kind of be there with the family and send their love to them. Because I think there's no distance between us and people in spirit. The only difference is we are still in the physical body and they are in a more spiritual body.
Well, that brings up the next phase for me, because you said sometimes they kind of hang around for some unfinished business. After that, now where?
That's a good question.
Thanks. That was the original question, really.
Exactly.
Get back to it.
All right. In 1992, my birthday's in April. I had a good friend, and he and we would talk really deeply about some of these kinds of things. And he told me once, he said, now, if I go before you do, he said, I'm going to come back and haunt you, James King. That's what he told me.
It's a good friend.
A good friend, right. He said it in a jokingly fun kind of a way, And so, anyway, 1992, on my birthday, we were all supposed to meet at a restaurant, and we were going to just have a good time. Well, he passed on my birthday.
On your birthday?
On my birthday, which is interesting. I've noticed that many times that family members or friends will pass on significant dates. And there's some kind of serendipity that's connected, or synchronicity that's tied into all of that I don't really totally understand, but I've noticed it. I've watched it over the years. It's just fascinating to me. But anyway, he told me, he said that he would try to connect with me, And so...
Haunt was the word he used.
Yeah, haunt, exactly. And so one night, I had a dream, and he was in it. And he was telling me, he said, wow, he said, this is really kind of neat. And what I saw in my dream was he was on this, lying down on this huge bed, and he was talking to me, and I said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm resting right now. I'm resting. And he'd had a very difficult life. He had been through a divorce, and he had lost his, his business, and he'd had some tremendous things happen. Then he had this heart attack, at age 42. And so anyway, he was in a place where he was resting for a while. It was almost like a spiritual hospital, where his soul needed to rest and recuperate, recharge, before he could go on to something else. And that what came to me, that he was kind of in a soul sleep or slumber for a while. Maybe a few days, few months, I don't know. But that's what the dream communicated to me. Well, then, a few months later, we had moved into a new house, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and I'd just eaten, and I went and laid down on the couch and was going to take a little nap. And so while I was taking the nap, he walks into the room. And he he was a businessman. He always dressed in a three-piece suit. I mean, just constantly. He was always dressed up. So he walked in a beautiful blue three-piece suit. And he's just smiling, you know, and he sits down and we just start talking, okay? And I was kind of half awake, half asleep situation. It wasn't a dream. It was a little more, there's more to it than just a dream. But it was very real. Anyway, and he starts talking to me and telling me some things, and then it dawns on me that he is not among the living, you know? And I say, Chuck, I said, you're dead. And he just laughs. He said, that's right. He said, you finally get it, don't you? But he was just, you know, it was just like you and I sitting right here, you know? And we were just communicating, we were just talking. But when we're fully awake and conscious, a lot of times we're so into the physical world that we're not as in tune with the spiritual. It seems like to me, what I've learned over the years is that the more relaxed you become, the more you open up to that spiritual dimension.
Yeah, it seems a lot of people get messages and things like that when they're in that half sleep state. You know, they just wake up in the morning, that kind of thing, or dreaming, like you talk about. But you know, I've heard some different theories on, you know, that we go, our spirit goes back into the one, the one energy and all, and then perhaps come back again, depending on lessons you need to be, you know, need to go through or learn. Soul growth, I guess. Is that? I mean, have you got any experience with that? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You know, you think about it, and here we are, if we're an eternal spirit, and this spirit was birthed out of the God spirit, then God has been around, you know, forever. You know, spirit has always existed. Everything that exists comes out of spirit. And so if we were birthed from spirit, then obviously we're never going to have an end, you know, because we're spirit. We're made of spirit. Spirit has no beginning and no end. It's eternal, you know. And so the spirit that I am, what am I going to be doing for millions of years? You know?
I've had that very overwhelming thought sometimes too. Like, what if I want out? You know?
Yeah. And I think that the key is, you know, is to fully put yourself in every experience, you know, because we're here now, you know. And a lot of people live their whole life wanting to escape, you know, wanting to avoid. And that's not the point. The point is to fully experience this life and what it is and what it's about. It's not all that there is. It's just a very, very small little, you know. Somebody said one time that when you die, you wake up and your spirit friends and family on the other side, they say, well, hey, did you have a nice sleep? You know. You know, what'd you experience? What'd you go through? And I believe that we do have, you know, friends and family and spirits on the other side who comfort us and who are around us. You know, in the Bible it says that we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, watchers, you know, who watch us and watch over us, you know. And I'm sure that there are angels. You know, I don't know exactly what angels look like. Some people, you know, talk about that. But I think that there are. You know, these beings, you know, that exist. It just makes sense to me that there would be. And they're all around us all the time to help guide us and, you know, and to make sure
listen,
that
I've had enough experiences that feel like I was protected by something, something way bigger than me, you know, that just defies logic. You know, that shouldn't happen like that, you know. So you don't have to convince me. Somebody else already did. But so, well, it sounds like the answer to the question, Jill's original question, which is where does your spirit go when you die? It sounds like it's to another dimension. Just to another dimension, another experience. And what that is, you'll have to just wait and see. Surprise.
Exactly.
Don't read the last chapter first, you know. You'll have to see how it ends yourself, huh?
It's just a new beginning, a new awakening, you know, another step, another journey to another aspect of this divine isness, you know, the existence that we have. And so, you know, to me, it's exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, there's a lot of people who believe otherwise, and I can see where it could be fearful.
Sure.
With some of the other belief systems out there.
Right.
But looking at a lot of the evidence, some of that stuff, it doesn't line up if you look at some other things out there and stories like that. Well, they're unexplainable.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
with some of the older teachings.
It's like I have my own experiences, and people could come to me and they could say, you know, I don't believe in God and I don't believe in an afterlife. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But you're not going to, you know, change my mind necessarily.
You can't convince me because I've been through it.
I've already experienced it.
Yeah.
It's like you can't tell me that there's no such thing as Godiva chocolate, you know, because I have had it and I've tasted it and I know it's real.
And I don't care. I will never believe it because I don't want that to be true.
Exactly.
I hear you. Well, I mean, it's a good answer. I mean, I like the fact that it's just another dimension. It's it's the next phase of your existence. And
right. Yeah.
You probably more learning.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, you know, we have little hints along the way to help us to know that there is that, you know, and not to get too caught up in this world. That's one of the things that I've learned so much is this world is temporary. It's just a wonderful place, but it's temporary.
And a small microcosm. I mean, just a tiny piece of time in your existence. It's so little.
Yeah.
But I guess when we look back, like it's easier to look back on it and keep in the bigger picture and look back and go, what was I so worried about? Just a blink of an eye, you know?
Yeah.
That's what it seems like. So.
Yeah.
So I'll try to remember that.
Okay.
This week and always.
Well, there's nothing to be afraid of. You know, that's what I want people to understand. Is there really is nothing to be afraid of. If God is love, okay, God loves us, then in the scriptures it says that we all come from God, and that when the soul leaves the body, it returns back to God. Mm-hmm. You know? So if I believe that God is love, then I came from love and I'm returning back to love. You know? But a lot of folks are, and this is one more thing I'd like to say, if we have enough time, is that I think it's important that whenever a loved one transitions, I've discovered that it's good to pray for them, to send them love, and to bless them and envision them going into the light, envision them going on to the next stage. Because I think there's a lot of people who've been taught some very negative things about the afterlife. And so many people, when they die, are afraid.
Right. And
they die in a state of total panic and fear. And they're afraid to move on. And so I think it's very important to just to pray for. We don't know how to die.
Yeah.
In our society.
Right.
We don't know how to help people to transition. You know, we're all so afraid, we're going to lose them, you know, which we do. And of course there's grief and there's anger, there's anguish, there's all of that. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about them and to pray for them and to bless them so that they have a smooth transition, you know, into the next stage of their growth.
Well, on that, because that's really what that question seemed to be about.
Yeah.
So I like that answer. That's a good answer. So
Thank you
for watching. I appreciate your time, James.
All right.
Thanks for the information.
Thank you,
we'll see you next time, and I hope to see you next time as well.
All right.